So is everyone here interested in chatbots? Yeah, let's hear it. No, this is great. Well, it's a really good turnout, so we're excited that there's so many people interested in learning more about chatbots. We are creating a Minnesota Bot Makers meetup, and it's still a relatively new and fresh meetup, and so we're really excited that everyone showed up today. Who is already on the meetup? Can I get a show of hands? Who's a member? Okay, everybody should go sign up for the meetup. And on meetup.com, MN Bot Makers. And another thing we're doing that we'll whip up later is we're putting together a Slack channel where we can start talking about bot stuff. And we would love it if you guys can join that. Right now we have to invite people manually, so maybe we'll shoot off some invites later today. But we'll try to get everybody on there, and that'll be a resource that we can use in the future. So with that, I'll jump into it. So today we want to have a bot out, we're calling it, which is more of an open discussion about bots. And our experiences with them, we want you to share your experiences, have a discussion about what you guys want to learn about chatbots, and how we can take this meetup and use that as a vehicle to build a community around chatbots in Minnesota. So we're super excited to get things going. So I guess I'm going to start off with just a little bit about chatbots to get everybody up to speed, and then we'll kind of open the floor here. Whoops. So this is a really popular bot out there right now. It's called Poncho. And Poncho is a weather bot. And I just pulled this from their website because I thought it was an interesting sell about why bots are cool. Try Poncho out, and you'll never want to open another weather app again. And bots are quickly replacing apps. So very few people actually go out and download apps anymore these days. And using something like a chat interface to get something that's a really small sort of communication element like the weather, just is starting to make more sense to do it through a chat app like Facebook. And Poncho is a great bot. It's probably one of the more popular ones out there. And it's really helpful. It'll actually just ping you when there's rain in your area. And so this is kind of the new wave of tech that's moving through the system right now that's kind of replacing apps. So in some ways, many people are thinking bots are becoming the new apps. Any question?
So, quick jump in. So, is Slack then the medium that these bots live, or is there a good medium?
Good question. To rephrase that, do all these bots live on Slack, or are there other mediums? Well, really good question, because actually my next slide kind of covers that. So bots are everywhere right now. There's a lot of platforms that you can see over here on the left, Facebook being a big one, Alexa. Who has an Alexa? Yeah, now there's Alexa skills, so you can just say, you know, what's the weather, all sorts of other things. They're all actually powered, in many cases, by the same bot frameworks. But they're all over the place, and they cover a lot of categories. So there's entertainment bots, there's bots for building bots, believe it or not, which is pretty meta. And there's finance bots, games, health, you name it. So the space is exploding. And a good resource to check out is Botlist, which has a huge database of all the bots out there. So definitely check that out. There's no shortage of chatbots right now. So why chatbots? Well, they have the promise to replace humans in a good way, or to be like a human, but be a robot and provide a very human-centered experience. The challenge is, oftentimes, bots can fail, and they aren't very human. We ask them a question, and we get a response that makes no sense, or it doesn't understand what we're trying to say. And in the worst case, you can imagine early chatbots being the phone sort of decision trees that you would go through, and you'd push a button on your phone, and it would give you, you'd slowly walk through this map to get a little bit of information, and it was just frustrating and slow. So bots have really evolved a lot, and now it's getting easier and easier to do natural language processing, to actually have a conversation with a bot and get useful information out of it. But there still are significant challenges for understanding what people want in a chat interface. But the dream is, once we can solve these problems, we can scale up what we're doing with these bots, and we can take what's a very human experience that we're replicating with a bot, and we can scale it and multiply it and have a whole bot army that is, serving the world, doing whatever task that we're interested in making a bot for. So with that, I'm going to make a pause here, and we'll switch over to our Slack channel and open up for discussion here. So I'm going to pass it off to Marty in the meantime, but what we want to do is we want to figure out what can we do with a bot meetup in Minnesota, and we're going to hash that out here today, and I'm going to take notes in Slack, and hopefully by the end of this session, we'll know what we want to do at our next meetup. We can start building a community around that and start creating events to support us all doing more with bots. So does that sound good? Awesome, cool. And I'm going to pass it over to Marty here, and he can.
Try to take it first and just explain what we're doing with bots. Sure. Take it over.
Cool.
Yeah. Hey, my name is Troy Strand. I'm a part of the team here at Raisable, and we're some of the MN bot makers, meetup founders, and organizers. So what we are doing with our chatbot, it's called Raisable, is a chatbot that helps build a crowdfunding campaign for various groups like students and pretty much anybody who wants to get some money from their friends and family. So Max is the name of our bot, and he kind of directs you through the process of, titling your campaign, creating a video using 5 different videos, and then stitching them together, and then making it really easy to share that out with the people that you know, and make it easier for them to share it with their friends too. So we're trying to take the process of crowdfunding and simplify it to a place where a student could do it. I teach at a middle school, and my 6th graders are able to do this on their own, which is kind of the dream as a teacher, to get them to be a lot more independent and be able to do these things in large groups instead of having me lead the process the entire time. So that's what we're doing here at Raisable. And then this is Marty, and he'll tell you more.
Hi, that was Eli, by the way, that
I should have introduced myself.
that's kicked things off. I'm Marty Weatherall, part of the team at Raisable and part of the team that's trying to get this meetup off the ground. As Troy mentioned, Raisable is not just a bot that you interact with and you try to see how human-like it can be. It's actually building you something. You interact with it and it builds you a crowdfunding campaign, and then it helps you while that campaign is live. It helps coach you on how to promote it and get it to more people. So I'm really intrigued by how the evolution of these bots are going to continue to help us in different ways. By the way, Troy handles our social media. Our Twitter handle is Raisable, RAISABLE, and he posted a link to our meetup group on Twitter at Raisable. So if you're looking for that link easily, and again, to get an invite to this Slack channel, just come up and make sure you give us your email, and we'll invite you to the Slack channel or join the meetup group at meetup.com called MN Bot Makers, right? But I'd love to throw it open to everybody here, and I can walk around with the mic or just repeat what people are saying back for the camera. But what are some interesting use cases of bots that people are seeing? How many here are bot makers? How many here are bot users? One thing I'll just throw into the mix to start with. There's so much bot news happening right now. I rely on my Google Now on my phone, which surfaces all this news that it thinks I'm going to want, which is kind of a bot in and of itself. But it knows I like bot stuff, so it feeds me these bot stories. VentureBeat is a huge resource for bot stories. MIT Technology Review of late started posting a bunch of stories, but I would recommend, you can certainly just Google around for bot news, but if you just stay tuned to VentureBeat, there's a ton of news about new and interesting use cases. A number of them have come out that try to emulate a celebrity. You'll see people that bot makers that will take all the interviews that a celebrity has ever given and then turn that into a database and then allow you to interact with that celebrity, but it's really a robot version of that celebrity, but it's based on things they've said. And you can just sort of see how long it takes for it to seem fake, right? I guess, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of that, but what's interesting is for the new 50 Shades of Grey movie, they took the lead character, Christian, and they made a bot for him, the promoters of the film. And he flirts with you, but he doesn't really care what you say back. That's the interesting thing. This trick is natural language processing. Can the bot understand you and actually give you a reasonable response? Well, Christian Grey he's on script. He's just doing his thing, and then he changes the subject, and then, whatever you say back, he's just kind of still going to flirt in his own way. So it feels very much like him, and he doesn't really have to understand you. And that's kind of an interesting way of getting around the limitations of natural language processing. And I'll say that, there is kind of artificial intelligence is behind all of this, right? And Eli was nice enough to teach me these sort of two sides of AI. You've got natural language processing, which we're in the early stages, and then you've got machine learning. And what we're going to try to do with Raisable is we're going to learn from all these crowdfunding campaigns we create and see what works. And then we'll adapt the coaching. Our bot, Max, will adapt the coaching of how to set up a crowdfunding campaign based on the previous campaigns and how they've been working. So you've got this combination of machine learning and natural language processing and computing that interacts in a human-like way, which is what I get excited about. It's really, in many ways, not only kind of the new apps, but almost the new UI, because we're kind of just going back to conversation like where we started, and that's exciting. Does anybody have anything they wanted to share about things they're seeing? And yeah.
I was just online right now, and we talked about, this is the next web, talking about Nadia. Came out today, yesterday. And
You want to talk about Nadia? And
I don't know, I just
explain?
pulled it up. Maybe you can pull it up too. Yeah, it's kind of
Breaking news.
what they call Nadia.
Oh, this is the human face, yeah. That came out this week. So yeah, there's a video actually. I don't know if we have audio hooked up, Eli, but it is really amazing because
Don't worry, there's subtitles.
there are, okay. So if,
The last picture, far right, the sixth picture, that's it.
I saw this video earlier this week of her. So we have Alexa, which has done a pretty good job of, she's a robot, but she talks to you and Siri talks to you. They put a face on the robot.
This is not it. No. That's the image, though. Does it page?
I think I posted it in our other Slack, actually.
That's it.
There we go. Does the video play? Essentially putting a very lifelike, using like cinema special effects, putting a very lifelike human form speaking the words that currently Alexa speaks.
Kate Blanchett is the voice of Nadia.
It's Kate Blanchett.
There, there's the third video.
So what I've been, here we go.
Hello there. My name is Nadia. In many ways, Nadia is a game changer. Go on, ask me something.
I think it's got a really good chance of being something
Everybody hear that?
Exciting, but also very important. The more questions and interactions I have, the smarter I become. Kate has been spending all of her spare time learning a new script. It might not be her next Academy Award, but it is certainly challenging. He is the voice of Nadia.
I'm a virtual assistant and I'm here to help you.
This is the bringing together of disability entrepreneurs, the best of the public service, the most brilliant scientists, Academy Award winners in a scientific and creative event that is really about a higher purpose for Australia.
The DIRG is Digital Innovations Reference Group, and it's a meeting of minds between disabled people, innovators, the MDIA, and people who work in the area of innovation and technology, all coming together to actually create something fantastic for the MDIS. It truly is a group of people with a need driving innovation, rather than somebody telling a group of people what they need to have their problems solved. And I think that that's just so exciting to be a part of.
People with a diverse range of disabilities have health sound and comes together and make sure it's like person is the best you can.
Maybe we're going to pause it
Yeah,
there
let's
for
pause
the
it.
sake of time.
Eli mentioned it earlier. When we would call one of those, as phone service became increasingly automated, you always knew when you were in an automated system. Like you instantly knew it from the voice. What's interesting with the chat interface, when we have Max helping people with crowdfunding campaigns, but we can jump in and manually drive Macs whenever we want. It's actually it's an incredible minimum viable product platform, right? Because you don't have to worry about designing an interface. The interface is Facebook Messenger or Slack or whatever you're using. You can build the beginnings of the interaction tree, but you can also jump in. We jump in, giving up a secret, but we jump in Facebook Messenger, and the end user doesn't know if it's us or if it's the automated system. And so we can do it manually long enough until we say, hey, that's really working. Now let's script that in. And so when it's not voice, you have this incredible flexibility, and it doesn't really matter to the end user. In fact, they may prefer not to be tied to a sort of a linear conversational thing if they don't have to be. Where this starts heading, though, is it's not only the voices are getting better, but the effects to put a human face on those voices are getting better. And where is that all headed? I mean, that sounds like great fodder for ongoing conversations in this meetup, but how many people here make bots or are working on making bots right now? Okay. Mind to talk about what you're working on?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily working on anything. So I do have a kind of a side hustle. It's an e-commerce website. So I think they opened up the platform at the Facebook event last June. So shortly after that, I created my first one. And I learned early on that was a very dumb bot. It was just based on a flow of questions and answers. And I realized very quickly the shortcomings of that when you're talking about men's T-shirts, women's T-shirts, and realized both. So there's difficulty there. But I just wanted to go through the process of launching it. It was an interesting process with Facebook developers. I had never experienced where you have to actually do a screen capture of your bot, submit it, and then they have to watch. So that was a new process for me with the Facebook developers. And then over the summer, then I started getting into API.ai, playing with some NLP and trying to go the next stage. So it's a continuous learning process. I don't have necessarily an outcome. My initial outcome for one of them would simply be e-commerce functionality, and then once payment processing rolled out this fall. So I'm learning as it goes. Probably my favorite bot that I use a lot, my primary function, I own a marketing agency in Minnetonka, so one that I actually use when I'm in client meetings is called GrowthBot. And I discover a lot of my bots on Product Hunt. That's probably my favorite place to learn about new bots. And GrowthBot, I can simply ask GrowthBot while I'm in a meeting, if they tell me a competitor that they have, I can say, okay, GrowthBot, what keywords is X website buying? And it goes out there and it finds me and it gives me the bids. What's your monthly traffic? So I can do competitive research while I'm in a meeting using GrowthBot. I don't have to get online and do that. And it's continuously.
I think we might have GrowthBot here actually. Do you know what command we could type up quick for it? They give you a bunch. Do you ask it for?
Yeah, there's GrowthBot. Yeah. There's a lot of things it can do for you in the marketing realm. You can say what monthly traffic of BestBuy.com.
So instead of a website where you would have a search field, it's just a different way of getting the same information.
Yeah, and I've never used it in Slack. I use it in Facebook Messenger. So my experience with GrowthBot in a Slack channel is.
If you follow those examples up top, it should get it.
This is part of the challenges of chatbots.
There you, okay, so they're told you right there. So it's a great competitive tool.
Thanks, Dale. Dale was the lone attendee at our first meetup with the three of us. And we had a second one, and Dale was not there, but another lone attendee was there. So we've had groups of 4 at the first 2, which is great. We're glad to see all of you here. We hope to multiply that number. Yeah.
So you were saying this is the weakest part of chatbots, as you pointed up to the questions that you have to ask it. Do you find different linguistic patterns from one region of the country to another? You know, where you'll have even in Minnesota, you'll have in the southern Minnesota, you'll have borrow me a quarter. Up here, it's lend me a quarter. You have different pluralities, you have different things like that, and I'm sure it gets weirder and weirder in different regions of the country. So The natural language processors that we have, what region are they coded for? What accent are they coded for? Are there differences between one region of the country and the other? And have you found ones that are better than others at dealing with the whole country as a whole?
It's a good question. I'm going to walk this to Eli. I can say that Alexa understands my kids and me right out of the box. It's amazing how versatile that bot has been. But
Yeah, good question. And that was an early challenge with Siri. Early on, as like an Irish person would pick up Siri, and it couldn't do anything with.
I have to speak to Siri in English accent. It can't understand my accent.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. I've actually, I probably just don't pronounce things very well, and I run into all sorts of issues. I think but interestingly enough, that problem is still a challenge, even just typing. So where it's not even like the way they're pronouncing anything, but just the language they use on a typing interface can be a challenge. So usually some of the NLP libraries out there, the platforms that they're using, they're built on a lot of pre-existing natural language processing, which is kind of biased towards English, of course. But what it lets you do is it lets you create your own training examples. So wit.ai, you can start seeding that with actual interactions that you have from your bot. And really, the goal is that you put your bot up and you're actually interacting with people, and you wait until someone does have a confusing interaction, and then you would go in as the developer and try to debug that interaction that they had and sort of come up with a trick for processing the way they phrased that. And then if you bump into someone else in the future that phrases their question like that, now your bot has learned and they know how to handle that. So
I'll just add to that really quickly. We see GrowthBot kind of prescribing exactly how to ask certain questions. What you're seeing in Facebook Messenger a lot, Poncho, by the way, Poncho always seems to be using like the latest functionality that Facebook's releasing. I get kind of annoyed. Poncho's, pinging me every day with weather that I don't really need to know. It's pretty obvious this time of year. But there's a lot of GIFs in there and buttons. So you can load up the interaction with buttons, save people the trouble of typing, but also guide people so that you're not relying on what their accent or the phrasing and stuff like that, at least in the text space. So you're seeing people getting smarter and smarter about guiding you down the roads that they want to guide you down. If it's just about conversation, then that's just hard, right? Hard to be as human-like as possible. But if you're trying to accomplish an end, I think you can actually develop your scripting in such a way that you don't just leave it open to natural, free-form typing, if that makes sense. You'll see a lot more buttons popping up as you look at a lot of these Facebook messengers. Was there? Yes.
So, can you mention a platform that is a framework that you suggest that we want to take a look at first, as far as actually building one of these? And follow up to that, is there any way of sharing knowledge bases, like what you were talking about earlier about building the bot, like you build some smarter rules for the bot to understand it? Are people sharing that knowledge base with other people?
Okay, two really good questions. The first one, I might have to be reminded of the two. The first one, what are some frameworks that you can use for building a bot? I guess actually that's something I kind of want to throw back to the audience quick. Can I get a show of hands? Has anyone tried building a bot using one of the simple sort of just web interfaces for creating a simple chat bot? We have a couple here who have done that. Has anyone coded a bot by directly communicating with the APIs that Facebook, for instance, offers? Has anyone done a bot at that level? A couple too? Okay. So I think that's one distinction I want to draw, and this is perfect because this could be maybe a good topic for a meetup. Would be actually, how can we all build bots? Right now, there are a lot of tools out there where anyone can just go create an account and actually build a pretty simple chat bot just through an online web interface. And there's actually a lot of different offerings for that. And then, so that's open really to anyone. Really not much developer experience is needed. The other side of that would be a more functional framework for working with those bots. And then those bots can sort of save responses in a database or maybe query other APIs. And like if you were Poncho, your bot actually has to go out to some sort of weather data source and send that data to the users. And that's usually done in a much more lower level framework. So a really common tool for building a bot like that would be using the Node.js platform, if anyone's familiar with that. And then you would use a library on top of Node.js to organize all your conversations. And the one we use at Raisable is BotKit. And that's actually managed, I believe they're bought by Slack now. And so Slack is kind of backing that framework. So I'd be happy to lead a session on setting up chatbots using BotKit. And that covers Slack and Facebook, Twilio, I think Twitter too. So that would be one route we could go down. Any show of hands, who would be interested in building bots like it's at the developer level? Great. Okay, so that's kind of like the low-level API, actually using these frameworks, right? Who'd be interested in more the web interface and creating some bots using one of these online offerings? So some too, but maybe fewer. So maybe is kind of having a build a bot session might be a good next meetup. Does that sound like it's resonating with a lot of people? And what I could do, and tell me if this sounds interesting, I could put together a little skeleton bot in a GitHub repo that we could all use. And then maybe we could actually deploy that on Heroku and get it set up in Slack. And if we could use our Slack channel as a test bed to try out our bots, I mean, we could honestly just have on the MN Bot Makers Slack, we could just have bots chatting with each other. It'll be great. It'll be a whole conversation. We don't even have to take part in it. So very cool. I think maybe that's a good candidate then for kind of our next meetup. But of course, if other ideas come around, we can re-rank them. Okay, can you remind me of the second question now?
The second question is, so you have your bot, you're learning from it and giving it, smartness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any framework for sharing that smartness with other people so that they don't have to start from the dumb?
Right. Okay, and to rephrase it for the...
Secret sauce, you mean?
Secret sauce, yeah. Which is actually that's what gives it that's what your value add or
It's interesting. That's it's kind of
It's open source versus proprietary in a way, right?
yeah.
So we have this, to be very transparent, we're creating a bot that builds crowdfunding campaigns. We're not trying to shout it from the rooftops yet. We don't want all the guys that are, established players in the crowdfunding space to know that quite yet. We want to build our thing. They could find out about it at any point, but we've got all this stuff behind the curtain that we've been building. So, I like the idea of that being proprietary personally, but I'll let Eli.
But I think there's an interesting point you're getting at. A lot of these bots that you're creating are basically training some sort of machine learning algorithm. Neural networks are popular. There's also some NLP-specific algorithms. And so they're creating this database of learnings. And can you share that? Is there a platform for sort of sharing this trained database? Right now, actually, I'm not too sure. I'm not aware of a nice system for sharing them. If anything, wit.ai might have something. I haven't actually been on there recently to see if they've created a sharing functionality. But they have a very intuitive way of sort of creating some of these NLP learnings. But also Watson AI, or Watson is the other big one, and they offer an interface to their sort of pre-trained database. So of course Watson won Jeopardy. So it has a very extensive database and can understand quite a bit. But the flip side, Watson is actually really expensive to use when you get down to the query prices. So every time you hit up one of its API endpoints, I think it's, I think you're getting charged maybe 1/10 of a cent. But when you're doing 1 million API queries, that adds up really quick, very, very quick. Whereas wit.ai is a free platform right now. Really interesting question, though. So maybe we will see more sharing of these trained libraries later on.
Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, to kind of leverage what he just said is, I know that things have to go through an evolution, but I keep thinking about the evolution of computer-based training, which I was involved in when it got to the high-level tool aspect with authorware, flowchart metaphor to be able to build your computer-based training, go through. And the number one key was being able to go through successive iterations. So to be able to do what you talked about, Marty, which is to do things in that script, you know, and modify the script and so forth. And so it's one thing to have an existing database, but it's another thing to have a domain expert or a content expert or a training expert or an instructor of some kind to be able to go through that successive iterations and to be able to make choices and to make additions to the script. Because then you're going to be able to really make that bot accelerate in its efficacy, right? And so that was my interest in coming to the session, was to say, well, maybe the meetup will cover that instead of, you know, kind of like where's the WordPress going to be for creating chatbots, right? I mean, you could get into some really hardcore programming and development, but where are the high-level tools and what's the state of the high-level tools and, you know, that kind of thing.
I was reading one of the articles out there, and it talked about a brand new title being born, which is conversation design, which is a blend of UX and copywriting. And so there's the technical side of getting a bot set up, but then, you know, there's so much ground to be broken, you know, and discovered on how to design these conversations, and so much personality comes out. There was another one I was reading about. I should have had this noted. It's purely a conversational bot, but it's like a teenage girl persona, and it's designed for teenage kids, you know, to like just interact with and just for a few minutes, and then she always has to go. Like, I gotta go, I gotta run somewhere, right? So. You know, you don't get to hang out long enough to try to like find out where the ends of the earth are, but she's really charming, and she shares pictures, and this was an MIT technology review. They were writing about this one, but they referenced the movie Her, and for the first time, like, the personality of this thing there was a bond being formed, and this bot wasn't trying to build anything or create any sort of, you know, transaction. Purely conversational. So I think the art of conversation design, we're just at the beginning of that, and so perhaps another meetup topic could be just diving into that and diving into, you know, to make up for the infancy of natural language processing, how are tricks and tools being used like buttons and things like that to get, you know, to make the experience more satisfying, but then also with a face going with the voice, and with just, you know, adding a lot of personality. What does that do to build bonds, you know, and create relationships? It's interesting. Would people be interested in that kind of a discussion as well, just conversation design? I would. I know that. Yes?
Is BotMakers focused exclusively on chatbots, only chatbots, all chatbots all the time, or are there other bots that you guys are interested in?
Name some other bots you're interested in that you're thinking of.
I guess I'm interested in like a business bot that, like, maybe you say, okay, go out every day and give me prices from my competitors. It's like a repeating bot that I don't have to necessarily interact with chat. Like, maybe I program it via an API, and it's more at the like the level where I'm not just like talking to it. Like, maybe I can be a little more specific.
And
does stuff on a routine basis.
yeah, and maybe can I rephrase that as would a kind of like a web crawler bot, would that kind of be the type of bot you're thinking?
Maybe a web crawler maybe does something in my house. Maybe it interacts with devices in my house, like, hey, make coffee at, you know, so-and-so time.
Okay, so yeah, more like the Alexa skills or something, syncing up maybe with the Internet of Things space. I think they're very intimately connected, actually. So in a lot of the tools, I think that gets a little bit more on the low-level type of bot design, but I think a lot of those tools are really pretty intimately married right now. So I definitely would be interested, if there's interest among other people too, for the bots that are sort of maybe interacting with other websites, pulling data down, or interacting with devices. Quick show of hands, who'd be interested in that? Just to get a survey. Awesome. Well, let's do it. I mean, yeah, we're designing the meetup right now, guys. So if you're interested in that, that'd be great.
A friend of mine just built a bot in Slack where he put a Philips Hue bulb up in a room and then a camera, and every time you could just command the bot with a color, and it would change the color of the bulb and then take a picture and post it back to Slack. Simple little interaction, but the ability for these bots to interact with, just ping servers and go back out to other connected things and do things might spark some ideas, and we could share that along with others at that meetup. Joel?
Is there a chat room where there's nothing but conversation bots going at it?
There's a famous video. Remember the Siri and Alexa were going at it? Was that what that was?
Yeah, although if you want to see that on,
Google Home Alexa.
In an endless loop.
Yeah.
you could kick off some, get all 4 of them or whatever, now however many they're up to in the one room. There is, if you want to see that on steroids though, I suggest checking out Reddit's subreddit simulator subreddit, and there, I don't know what's going on in there, but apparently it's a lot of bots talking to each other, and that it gets crazy. There's even a best of for that. Check that out.
It's one thing I was going to mention, and you guys have heard me say it before, but when I look at, because somebody mentioned like channels, where you can build them and what have you, I'm going to be biased towards saying a starting place, depends on what you want to do. If it's for a Slack community or if it's for a specific application, that's fine. But if you're just looking for creating a chatbot that's going to be for general public consumption and so on and so forth, one thing that I see still not being addressed to the level it could be is discoverability, right? Because it's kind of like the early app market, where I built an app now, and nobody build it and they won't come. So is it discoverability? So the reason I like the Facebook platform is because within the last 2 months or so, they rolled out an ad unit that allows you to actually do paid advertising, driving Facebook audiences to the bot. So user acquisition is being solved there. I don't know how it's being solved in other places, other than I hear Bing is coming out with a bot search engine, but discoverability is still an issue.
That's a good point. Dale's talking about discoverability of bots and Facebook being maybe the best at, obviously there's a ton of users on Facebook, understatement, but they do have an ad unit now, which I learned about from you, which is a new ad unit. They certainly sell a lot of ad units, but one of them actually would drop you right into a conversation in a bot, as opposed to linking you to a brand page or out to a site. You click this ad unit and you're all of a sudden interacting. It just opens up Messenger. So that's really appealing. One other bot platform I want to make sure I mention is just simple text SMS. There's a bot that came out relatively recently called Resist Bot. It's really interesting. Talking about kind of real world effects too. You tell it where you live and your zip, and then it allows you to message your lawmakers, your leaders in Congress. And you can type the bot, and it's a text interaction, but you type whatever you want to send to Keith Ellison or whomever, and it actually takes that and turns it into a fax, and it faxes Keith Ellison, because those guys need to pay attention to the paper stuff that's coming in, so letters and faxes, but it's not always convenient. But for a text interaction to actually produce a physical version of your message to go through, that's another interesting thing. And certainly text bots, reply yes, and things like that. There's a lot happening in the SMS space, although you rack up some charges, if I'm not mistaken, with trying to send SMS while, you could build a Facebook bot and interact all day for nothing. But I think, strategies for discoverability, once you have built something, as a marketer, I'm really interested in that too. Show of hands, how many people would be interested in figuring out how people would find your bot? You just want to build it, and okay, all right, good.
Quick question on that front too. Who would be interested in using a bot as part of like a startup or a business, or maybe thinking about monetizing a bot? So there's some people, some just for fun, but some, okay, can we actually turn this bot into a business of some sort? So that'd be cool. I mean, obviously that's our whole business model, is using a bot to run a crowdfunding platform. So I think we would definitely have some good input on that front. One question I did want to ask, we mentioned that the user interface and user experience with chatbots is all the conversation. And right now there's a lot of people that are out there trying to do different types of conversation design, and there's almost like 2 schools of thought. And one of those schools of thought is you need to have the coolest, most interesting, wacky bot like ever out there, that's always saying something interesting to you. And then maybe another school of thought is more like, no, maybe like some of these bots should be just helping us out or being like the helpful assistant, kind of like Siri. She doesn't give you a joke every time you're like, do I have any meetings right now? She actually gives you an answer rather than like frustrating you. So I guess I'm kind of interested in some thoughts. What people have seen is, what would you want your chat UX to be? Like, who would you want to talk to, and what would be like the archetype of a good chatbot for you guys?
Maybe a personality choice for your bot, because sometimes you want the Donna bot from Suits, or sometimes you want the Siri, just give me the facts type bot. So sometimes you want to do both. So maybe your bot should have a way of saying, hey, today I want wacky because I'm bored,
Yeah.
Today I want, give me the facts, don't bother me,
So kind of, when you interact with a bot, maybe it should be kind of set what that expectation is up front, and kind of honor that. And that's, I think, actually meshes well with a lot of good UX design in general. And was there a comment over here?
Yeah, so I really like Quartz. If you have like the Quartz app for news, it's really simple. It's like the millennial version of news. So you get these little bite-sized chunks, and then it's just real simple A/B. Like, I want more information. No, I'm not interested in that. And of course, they're probably running all sorts of queries behind and getting information about people's selection and choices. And then, serving news to me, that makes more sense. So I think even before you get into like character and voice, and if you're talking about UX design for conversation, I think it starts super low.
Yeah.
And it's curated.
So content is still king, even in the chatbot space.
Until technology can actually become smarter and better, I think there's a lot of work yet to be done on the data side of this. Because just because you put a chatbot out there, where, like you were talking about earlier, where are you getting all this information to make decisions in the first place? It has to learn somewhere. It has to start somehow.
Right.
So before you can get into personalization, you just have to put it out there to get some decisions made.
Right. So, and that's kind of, I think, just a general theme. I think it sounds like there's a lot more interest around bots that are a bit more functional and less of just a chat experience here. So is that kind of the vibe? Like, who wants to make a bot that is a chat experience? Maybe show of hands quick. And then the alternative coming up would be, who wants to make a bot that does something, pulling data down, interacting with the world somehow, and providing maybe a service?
And also throw this out. Does anybody use Duolingo for learning languages? Have you gotten to the chatbot? Has anybody done that yet? So that's pretty simple to do if you want to learn Spanish or something ridiculous like Polish, like I'm trying to do. That's a really good example of like how to have conversation level, but also learning at the same time. It's probably one of the most smarter, more commercialized with millions and millions of people using.
Right.
Just as a world example.
Yeah, really good. So that's actually using an actual chatty type bot for something very practical and functional. So that's a good bit of learning. I'll hand over.
Sorry, I keep reaching for the mic. Just so everyone heard what Matt was saying, the Quartz news app. So Quartz is a site that everybody knows, but if you download their app, you do not see an appified version of their site. It's all chat-based delivering of the news. So a really interesting use case there. And then Duolingo for language learning, chat-style interaction. One other quick note on personality of these bots. I heard that that Daimler Chrysler's approach to self-driving technology, because all the car companies have to figure out self-driving, but they're thinking that people are still going to buy cars, which I think is debatable once self-driving happens, but they're going to buy cars, and if you buy a Dodge Charger versus you buying a Chrysler Sebring or something, they're going to design the self-driving robot to have a personality of the car that you've bought. So the Dodge Charger is going to drive very aggressively, and the other...
There'll be a driver who doesn't use
Yes, exactly. So if we're still buying cars when they're all self-driving, we can choose the personality perhaps. So it's another riff on the personality of a bot, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of components to make a bot, like the machine learning, NLP, and AI that you don't necessarily have to do a bot with. Those skills would be interesting in other areas. I think that'd be interesting to have at least one.
Yeah, just so...
about.
So there's the core tools used for these bots is, a machine learning AI. I think having a session that just focuses on that, and maybe even a bit of maybe an overview of some of the algorithms in actual practice, that would be another really interesting meetup. So who here has used, quick survey, who has done some machine learning of some sort? A little bit. Is anyone, okay, has anyone done natural language processing of some sort? Quick, raise your hand if any of these terms are familiar. Random forest, decision tree, okay, neural network. Anybody? Okay, so there's some interest there. I think that would be a really cool session to just focus on some of one component of a lot of these chatbots. And I think there's some broad applicability. So while a random forest classifier might not be useful for chatbots, they might be really handy if you're parsing a lot of data that you're ripping down from the web somewhere. So I think there's some broad applicability there that we can go over, maybe start with an overview course and maybe have a topics meetup at some point. Yeah.
So I'm just going to pin thumb mini analytics because we actually have a lot of stuff on that. I'm one of the folks on the board there. So we actually are doing a lot this year in AI and machine learning. So our big data tech event's coming up in June. So about 1,000 people will come to that. So it'll be a great place if you're wanting to learn more about that. Great place to go.
Excellent. Yeah, mini analytics is great, and maybe we should do a collab or something. We can have a bot for you guys.
We are getting short on time, so I want to make sure we'll take a couple more questions, but let's have this spill over into these meetups, and hopefully you guys can come. Does everybody know how to find us on meetup.com, MN Bot Makers? If you go to @Raisable on Twitter, there's a link to that bot group, and we can invite you to the Slack channel, too, if you want to be kind of perpetually meeting. Randy.
How good are chatbots speaking different languages? So if we're doing English here, but what if we want some keys and something so can interpret?
Question about different languages, bots with different languages. Have we played with that much? Does anybody here have anything to throw in on that?
I haven't personally, so I'm not aware of the tools out there, but I know it's a big area that people are interested. Obviously, Duolingo. Whether or not that functionality is available in the wider world, I think is a good thing to research. Does anyone know by chance, or have anything to add to that?
All I've heard is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question.
Yeah. So we're talking about how you go about using bots for different things. So think about more of the utility or functional and maybe even data analytics. So from like a medium to large size business, right? You got all these different kinds of systems that you're using to run your business, for ERPs, resource management, all your financials. So you got all this data that you're churning every single day, right? And every time we introduce a new system into our business, it's trying to learn different codes to be able to run those reports. So, is there any discussions about how to introduce bots to be able to interface with the bot to do the data analytics for you and learn what kind of information you need in your role versus trying to learn how to run those reports? They learn to run those reports for you, so it becomes more ubiquitous in your business. Get the information at a verbal command of the bot versus trying to run the reports the way we do.
Right. Good. Really good question. And to summarize that briefly, our bots becoming, in many ways, employees like your analytics employee, and helping you out with all the integrations and analytics across the spectrum of business, and just feeding you the reports when you need them. Really interesting question. I think there is a lot of activity in that space, mainly probably from more the service providers and kind of systems that you actually pay for. But it's definitely happening, and it's already integrated with Slack. So we should definitely follow up on that. Right, it's time, so we're going to have to shut this down. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please sign up on Meetup and reach out to us, and we'd love to get you on the Slack. Thank you.